Greetings, members, one and all of the Salivation Nation. Congress seeks to freeze Russian gold reserves. Let's explore! And you're looking at the prices for gold and silver at the time that I record this video, which is hours before you see it. So these prices could change dramatically one way or the other, more than likely probably to the upside, although most are saying now that gold may have overreacted a bit after reaching all-time highs before, because the Asian markets are open as I record this video and they are down slightly. And silver is up slightly. And we are seeing palladium continue to skyrocket, understandably so, considering that some of the sanctions that are already in place in Russia, who is the most sanctioned country in the world now by the United States and the West, with only Iran behind them and then Venezuela. But let's look here about what's going on, what's happened so far with regards to gold. What is Congress seeking? We may remember a week or so ago, I did a video about the London bullion market, setting out inquiries to some of the refineries in Russia and to assess whether or not they should be sanctioned. Well, they did it. Several members of the community sent me this story that it actually has occurred. The London bullion market bans Russian gold refineries. Actually, they say bars Russian gold refineries. I guess that's probably a more correct term, I guess, but it is a little bit of a play on words. Regardless, here, the London Bullion Market Association, the LBMA, said on Monday it had suspended its accreditation of 6 Russian precious metals refiners, meaning they will no longer be able to sell gold and silver in the London market, which is the world's largest. The LBMA did not give a reason for this suspension, but the association last week told Reuters it had asked the refiners if they have commercial links with sanctioned Russian entities. And that's the news that I covered earlier when that news broke. Governments, including those of the U.S. and the European Union, have imposed sanctions on numerous Russian individuals, companies, banks, and the Russian Central Bank since the Kremlin sent troops into Ukraine on February the 24th. Russia produces around 330 tons of gold a year, worth $20 billion at current prices, around 9% of the totals mined worldwide, according to the consultant's Metals Focus. That's pretty amazing. It produces around 1,350 tons of silver each year, worth about $1 billion, which is about 5% of global mine supply. And so with those numbers, it should mean that silver should be rising a bit too, maybe even more than it is now. But nonetheless, 5% compared to 9%, you kind of do the math, and that may be one reason why the ratio is not catching up, or is not narrowing between the two. Most of that metal was bought by Russian commercial banks, which sent it to refiners before selling it abroad, or to the Russian Central Bank, which said on February 27th it would resume purchases of gold in the local market. Bankers and traders have said the removal of Russian refiners would have little impact on the market, and Russian metal would still find buyers in places such as China and the Middle East, although they have to build those relationships. Gold and silver bars produced by the refineries while they were accredited remain valid to trade according to LBMA rules, which state that refineries are to comply with all the relevant economic trade sanctions list. And then it lists the 6 refineries there. All of these were accredited to produce both gold and silver, except Moscow Special Alloys Processing Plant, which was only accredited for gold. So these 6 refiners will no longer be accepted as good delivery by the London bullion market until further notice, the LBMA said in a market notice. And none of the refineries responded to request for comment. But this news, which just broke, by the time you watch this, it will have been, maybe hours ago. Senators seek to freeze Russian gold reserves. A bipartisan group of senators offered legislation on Tuesday to freeze Russia's gold reserves, arguing the move would make it difficult or more difficult for Moscow to avoid the pain from international sanctions imposed over the country's invasion of Ukraine. The free world sanctions are devastating Russia's economy, and as long as Putin continues his unprovoked and horrific invasion of Ukraine, we must keep up the pressure, says Senator Angus King, an independent from Maine, said in a statement announcing the legislation. Russia's massive gold supply is one of the few remaining assets that Putin can use to keep his country's economy from falling even further. That's proof positive, folks, that gold is the ultimate safe haven, and we know that Russia has been accumulating a lot of it over the years. And now we know why. More than likely, Putin has had this plan in place for quite a while. And so it makes you wonder, and that's why it's good for us to have gold too. The thing is how effective will this really be? And, because more than likely, you will see this kind of thing could happen to individuals. You talk about sanctions. We've already seen it to some extent happen in Canada with people with their accounts there. Could they do it with gold too? Let's see how it could happen on an individual basis if we look at it from on an international scale here. The Stop Russian Government and Oligarchs from Limiting Democracy Act would apply secondary actions to American entities that intentionally transact with or transported gold from Russia's central bank holdings. Americans would also be subject to sanctions if they sold gold physically or electronically in Russia, according to the proposal sponsored by King and fellow Senators John Cornyn of Texas, Bill Hagerty of Tennessee, and Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire. The bill would also provide guidance to Americans as to how they could avoid such sanctions, the senators explained. So very interesting indeed. In fact, I know one channel, Cybercurtain Twitcher, was able to procure some gold coins from Russia. That may not be allowed anymore, especially gold bullion coins. I actually would love to have a gold bullion coin from Russia, but they were hard to come by even before all of this happened. So to be able to get one now would be extra special if this legislation gets passed and if other nations agree to this other than just the United States. Today, Russia holds $130 billion in gold reserves in the country and is able to exploit a loophole in the existing sanctions targeting its central bank by allowing government officials and oligarchs to launder money through gold, according to the senators. Due to this loophole, the Russian Federation is now buying gold to offset the devaluation of the ruble and selling that gold on international markets in exchange for high-value currency, the senator said. So they're essentially trying to use it to get this currency. So they're going back to fiat, high-value currency. Some of that high-value currency is probably the euro and the dollar, is my guess. Interesting. And so by implementing secondary sanctions, they said that they would aim to deter the purchase of Russian gold and thereby foil Russia's ability to soften the financial impact of the sanctions. By sanctioning these reserves, we can further isolate Russia from the world's economy and increase the difficulty of Putin's increasingly costly military campaign. We urge the speedy passage of these bipartisan sanctions to hold Putin accountable for his crimes. Cornyn described Russia as having taken a page out of Venezuela's book by manipulating this legal ambiguity and laundering money through gold. This legislation would apply secondary sanctions to parties who helped Russia finance the war by buying or selling this blood gold, Cornyn said in a statement. Hagerty urged Congress to make it harder for Putin to liquidate Russia's gold, stressing that these activities serve to fund its invasion of Ukraine. These bipartisan secondary sanctions on Russia's gold transactions will build on the Biden administration's recent Russia sanctions and further choke off Russia's economy from capital. You all probably know by now that all of the oil has been stopped from Russia. There's been sanctions on gold too, so the United States at least will not be buying any gold from Russia now. As Russia's economy continues to plunge in financial freefall, Hassan called upon legislators to make it sure that Putin can't circumvent our sanctions. This bipartisan bill closes a critical loophole that would allow Russia to sell off its gold reserves to prop up the Russian economy, Hassan said. The U.S. and our allies must be steadfast in standing up to Russian aggression and ensure that we block any escape hatch Putin has in getting around the full weight of our sanctions. And that's just it. If the United States does it is one thing, but you have to get other nations to agree. That's another thing. And then you have the other two very large economies, the Indian economy and the Chinese economy. And those are two very other things. And until you can get them on board, I think it's going to have somewhat of a limited effect. We'll see. It's very interesting. I think it's a good idea to do, for sure, to stop Putin. This is definitely good. We'll see how it plays out. But he always can also transact from within country as well, too, and maybe even sell some of that gold to the oligarchs or to the rich in the country. I don't know. We'll see in order to fund his war. But we'll see how it plays out. But it's an interesting, fascinating concept. Do you think it will work? Let me know what your thoughts are. But they're going after his gold in one way or another. They can't get the physical. It's always on hand. Could they do it to us? And how would that happen with us? Well, here in the United States, if they so wanted to, they could forbid the transactions of gold here. They wouldn't have to confiscate it, per se. But they could say, hey, it's illegal to sell it. It's illegal to buy it. In a sense, they did that, at least for the buying of gold, for quite some time since 1933, that executive order, until 1974, I believe, when they made it legal again to buy and sell gold. So there you have it. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Would like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for taking the time to watch, and to encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.